lo que necesito yo es como en realidad.
There are many types of garden pests that need to be controlled if you are to have a success. Perhaps the worst is irresponsible people who take food from your garden. It is important to have a garden near your home or protected from people who would take your produce. The next pest that can harm your garden is domestic animals, including pets such as dogs and cats, or barnyard animals such as chickens, ducks, goats, or even cows. The garden needs to be protected from these as well. It may require a fence around the garden to keep these out. Wildlife can also be a problem for the garden. Seed-eating birds are one of the worst offenders. They can easily eat all your seeds before they even sprout. We use many methods to control birds. One very effective method is to hang pieces of foil or cassette tape around the garden. The birds are confused by this and stay away. Insects are the most persistent pests for the garden and require the most effort to control. Some insects can fly, and they fly into the garden. We make big yellow sticky traps to capture and kill the small flying insects before they invade the garden. The most common flying insect pest is the whitefly. These very small insects, about 1/4 of an inch, are very fast to multiply and, if left alone, will infest a garden. The yellow sticky traps attract the whitefly, who like yellow. The plastic sheets are wiped down with motor oil once a week. The whitefly will stick to it, become trapped, and die. Other flying insects are not as easy to control. The white cabbage moth may enter the garden and lay its eggs on the substrate. Since it takes about 5 days for the eggs to hatch, you have that time to find the eggs and destroy them. If they hatch into larvae or caterpillars, they may destroy the plants in that grower. There are also flying insects that come at night. They can be controlled by hanging a light or putting a candle in a dish of water. This traps the insects at night. One of the worst garden pests is aphids. These soft-bodied insects are often brought onto garden plants by ants. The ants use the aphids like cows. They place them on the plants, and as the aphids eat the plants, they produce a sweet honeydew that the ants gather like milk. So to control aphids, you must keep ants out of your garden. If ants are a real problem, your garden can be constructed with physical barriers to the ants. A useful substance is tanglefoot, a sticky material that can be placed around the table leg supports. Dishes of water around your growers will keep the ants away. To keep pests away from the garden, we have several methods. Our first defense is spraying the plants with a garlic spray at least once a week. Most insects avoid the smell of garlic. It makes a wonderful addition to the garden, and it can be harvested and used for a garlic spray. A garlic spray is made by first crushing about 8 heads of garlic. Once the garlic is crushed, it's added a teaspoonful per quart of water, then sprayed on the plants. We have many other sprays that can be used to prevent insects. They are described on the Hydroponics and Microfarm CD. One of the sprays used most often is a soap spray. Any dish soap can be used for this spray, a teaspoon of soap per quart of water. But Dr. Bronner's peppermint soap is highly recommended because, as well as being a soap, it also has peppermint that is an insect repellent. The soap spray can be used to kill some insects. It is sprayed directly on the insects, and then on any larvae you can find on the underside of the leaves. This works for aphids and whitefly larvae as well. We also use nutrient spray on leaves against some insects. It has the added benefit of supplying nutrition to the leaves and makes the plant grow faster. Another method for controlling insects is to plant special herbs and flowers that repel insects. Several of these repellent plants are also crops you can use for income. One of the most common is flowers such as marigold or a special daisy. Marigolds can be sold as flowers or as plants. Other plants that are repellent are lemon balm, lemon basil, and lemon thyme. They contain citronella oil, and crushed leaves even repel mosquitoes. Most of the mint plants, catnip, pennyroyal, spearmint, are natural insect repellents. They can be planted through the garden and harvested for herbs and seeds. Garlic is a natural repellent. Garlic, marigold, lemon balm, and others can be planted around the garden to control and reduce pests for both the garden and for people. In modern greenhouses where a single crop is grown, a new type of pest control has formed. It is called beneficial insects. At Epcot, in the hydroponic greenhouse, there is a part of the building devoted to raising beneficial insects to control the insects in the land exhibit. A beneficial insect is any insect that eats other pests or insects in the garden. In the case of Epcot, the greenhouse has a serious problem with leaf miners. Leaf miners make a furrow on the leaf and, when infested, can destroy a crop. The land exhibit controls leaf miners by raising a special wasp that preys on the leaf miners. The wasps are released into the greenhouse to hunt down any leaf miners there might be there. Ladybugs eat aphids. In their 3 to 6 week lifespan, they can eat 5,000 aphids. They can also eat whitefly, so a good ladybug population in your garden can be a very important insect control. Ladybugs love tulips, lilies, and other cup-shaped flowers that capture water. They also love dill, fennel, white cosmos, and geraniums. They can be purchased and then released at sundown into a garden. The ladybugs lay their eggs on the undersides of the leaves. These eggs hatch in about 5 days, and the larvae look like tiny black caterpillars with orange spots. They go into a cocoon and emerge as adults in about a week. There is a large industry now called integrated pest management that has biological solutions for harmful insects in the garden. In commercial hydroponic greenhouses, biological control is now used for almost the entire industry. Chemical poisons or insecticides are not used in hydroponic systems. This is partly because we do not have the soil and soil microbes to break down the poisons after they are used. Integrated pest management uses predator insects to control other insects and occasionally uses a disease to infect unwanted insects. In our gardens, we encourage those insects, such as praying mantis, that eat insects. We offer them habitat and then leave them alone to hunt insects. For commercial growers in protected greenhouses, the industry has biological controls for almost every problem. These controls are routinely used in the greenhouses to prevent insect infestations long before they happen. Other greenhouses use wasps to control whitefly. The greenhouse buys tags that have wasp eggs on them and attach them to tomato plants. The eggs hatch every 2 weeks. Other greenhouses use beneficial insects for pollination. Many plants need to have their flowers pollinated to produce fruit. Bumblebees in boxes are placed in many commercial greenhouses to pollinate the plants. Some of the gardens in very sunny areas can benefit from a shade cloth cover. Shade cloth is a cloth screen material that is in shades like 20%, 30%, and 50%. A 50% shade cloth for a very sunny climate can cut water required in half. A garden of 40 square meters can use 120 liters of water a day instead of 240. The shade cloth will offer some protection from seed-eating birds, especially if the shade cloth drops down over some of the sides of the garden. A natural alternative to shade cloth is a woven roof over a grower. Anything that covers about half the sky will work as a 50% shade cloth. This cover can also help the plants survive a single rare night of frost. Another type of protection for young seedlings is a plastic cover. This type of cover will protect the seedlings from most birds and insects and keep a warm, rain-protected space for seedlings. When a garden is outside, this seedling protection is a very good idea. Another form of protection for the garden is to hang plastic bags filled with water. The eyes of insects are confused by the reflections and they will stay away from your garden. In a garden space of 20 feet by 20 feet, it helps to hang them about every 6 to 8 feet. Tinfoil or a very shiny reflective surface can be placed on the substrate of the grower. The reflections confuse the insects and most stay away from the garden. There are insect-eating birds that do not eat seeds. These should be welcomed in the garden. By providing the right birdhouses, these birds can be attracted to your garden. Besides eating insects, these birds will see your garden space as their territory and may protect it from other birds. There are many things that eat insects, and these helpers can be very beneficial in a garden. Most bats eat insects at night. They are especially helpful in controlling moths. Moths that lay eggs that become caterpillars. Bats can be encouraged to stay in the garden by building bat houses. Bat houses for 4 or 5 bats will be very effective in controlling nocturnal insects. Spiders, lizards, and snakes are usually beneficial to the garden. The hydroponic garden needs daily care. In the garden, everything happens rapidly. The plants grow rapidly, and disease or insects spread rapidly. So it's very important to watch carefully for any sign of a problem in the garden and make sure the insects or disease are controlled. There are many types of plant diseases, and they are sometimes hard to distinguish from nutrient deficiencies. For example, blossom end rot in tomatoes looks like a disease, but it is caused by a calcium deficiency in the nutrient water. One method of identifying a disease is to notice how it is spread in the garden. Is it in all the growers or just a few? Just a few is more likely to be a disease. Many diseases only attack certain types of plants, so look to see if the problem is in just one type of plant. Plant diseases are usually in one of 3 forms: bacteria, virus, or fungus. Fungus diseases, such as powdery mildew and downy mildew, usually occur in damp conditions. Powdery mildew is a spotted white mildew that commonly attacks wide-leaf plants such as cucumber, squash, and cantaloupe. It first appears as small white spots that grow outward. It is important to try to control it when it first appears, or it may take over your garden. The way we control powdery mildew is to spray with a milk spray. This spray is made with 1/10 of milk and 9/10 of water. As the spray dries, it helps kill the mildew. Another spray that can be used is a spray made from worm castings or compost. It also has components that help control fungus. Most fungus disease can be controlled by spraying the infected leaves with milk. Bacteria infection in the plant is usually controlled by disinfecting the substrate. All garden tools should be disinfected or at least washed as they are used. Keeping the garden clean is one way of reducing bacterial infection. There is also a third method of infection, which is called virus. The viruses are especially damaging to plants and are usually controlled by controlling the insects that bring these into the garden. Usually the virus is brought into the garden by an insect. In this case, the aphid brings a virus to the plant as it feeds from the plant juices. So in this case, the virus is controlled by controlling and preventing the aphid, and doing that is partly by controlling the ants. When you find a disease in the garden, it is important to act quickly to get rid of the disease. It may be necessary to remove any diseased leaves or branches and perhaps the whole plant. There are sprays that can be used on some diseases to stop infection. Most blights, a scaly covering on the branches, can be sprayed with baking soda. Vinegar can be used to treat leaf spot and scab. There is a disease common to seedlings called damping off. In this case, there is a disease in the substrate that makes the seedlings wither and die. This can be prevented by spraying the seedlings with a seaweed spray. If you have a problem with rot in the root vegetables, hydrogen peroxide can be sprayed in the substrate. Elderleaf is a good spray for most leaf diseases, and it is especially good for diseased tree leaves.
El gozo de la vida, mis amados, disfrutar, gozar de amistades por toda la eternidad.
Some plant diseases are hard to recognize. Sometimes they look like nutrient deficiencies. Most plant diseases are caused by microbes, bacteria, virus, or fungus. There are some that you might find in your garden. It is important in controlling disease in your garden to restrict who can walk into the garden and making sure that those who come in have clean hands. Some gardens have a trough of water and chlorine so workers can disinfect their shoes before they enter. Some commercial greenhouses have all workers wear fresh, clean clothes and then lab coats. This is to prevent diseases from entering on unclean clothing. Many diseases enter your garden by unclean conditions. One way disease is brought to the garden is by people handling the plants and produce without washing their hands. Lots of diseases can be introduced to your garden on people's hands. An easy way to control it is to provide a place in your garden where guests or workers can wash their hands before touching the plants. This is very important for anyone that smokes tobacco because that tobacco could have diseases that will affect the plants. Any unclean conditions can introduce disease into the garden. Containers should also be washed between each crop. All the old vegetable matter you take off the garden should be removed and buried in the worm farm or the compost pile. If a plant or grower becomes infested with insects or disease, it may be necessary to pull those plants out before your whole garden is destroyed. When this is the case, put the diseased plants in a closed plastic bag and place in the sun for a week or two. The substrate of that grower also needs to be cleaned.
Y lo que necesito yo es como en realidad. Esta es mi profesión.
The substrates we use for the plants can become diseased as the plants grow. So after a crop is completed, we disinfect the substrate using solarization. For years, commercial greenhouses have used fumigation methods such as methyl bromide to sterilize the substrate. This is now not allowed in most countries because methyl bromide is an environmental hazard. What many do now is called solarization. The substrate is placed on a black plastic sheet on the ground, layered about 1 inch thick. A second clear piece of plastic is placed on top and secured at the edges with bricks, rocks, or something with weight. This is left in the sun for a month to cook out any diseases. Then the substrate can be used again. If you are raising food to sell, it is important to make sure your plants carry no diseases that can make your customers sick. A common disease that can be transmitted on the produce is E. coli, a bacteria that is introduced in two basic ways. One is through the hands of the person harvesting the produce. So again, it is very important to wash your hands before harvesting any food from your garden. Another way that E. coli is introduced to your garden is through the waste manures of cows and other barnyard animals. If you have plants in soil or in the ground, take care that the growing place is not below the runoff from animals such as cows. If you use animal wastes in your garden, it makes sure the wastes are thoroughly composted or decayed to remove any possible germs. If the wastes are used in a worm farm and given sufficient time, like a few months, the germs should be gone. A simplified garden, if built up off the ground on tables and kept clean, should avoid many of the pests that can be found in plants and soil. Such things as soil-based diseases, like most rots and some worms, do not occur in the substrates. Just as we do not have to weed our gardens, we avoid many diseases in hydroponics.
What